Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OncoDaily. My name is Emma Ter-Azaryan, and I'm the head of OncoDaily TV. Today, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Susan Dent. Dr. Susan Dent is the director of the cardio-oncology program and director of the Judy DiMarzo Cancer Institute Survivorship program. I think I don't need to say much about Dr. Dent and the rest we will be discussing during the interview. Hi, Dr. Dent. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for allowing me to be interviewed today.
I think we can start from the beginning, and our audience would love to know what first inspired you to go into medicine, and how did oncology become your calling?
Well, that's going back a few years, but always happy to share how I went into medicine. It wasn't a straight path. I initially actually did my undergraduate degree in kinesiology, so was studying exercise physiology. And I think when I was doing my undergraduate work, I became very interested in how the body works and the whole idea behind why individuals become ill and what we can do to try and not only treat people, but what we can do proactively to try and prevent illness. So after I finished my undergraduate degree, and then went to medical school, and quickly in medical school became very interested in oncology. And I think that interest really stemmed from the fact I was just fascinated with what made cells become cancerous. And importantly, what could we do to try and help individuals with cancer, both those who were being treated in a curative fashion, but also those who were living with cancer. And I was fortunate to live with my cousin at that time, who was an oncology nurse. So it really was a good partnership originally. And that really led me then subsequently to start my career in cancer. And eventually I started treating everyone with cancer. So I was a general oncologist, but eventually became a breast cancer oncologist.
When did you first start noticing the heart-related side effects of cancer treatments? And what made you want to focus on that intersection?
You know, we've always known that this class of drugs called the anthracyclines can affect the heart in a negative fashion. And although we had known that for many years as oncologists, and we monitor the lifetime dose individuals received of anthracyclines, didn't really sort of trigger any action in terms of us looking at preventative strategies. When trastuzumab, a monoclonal antibody against the HER2 protein, was first approved in the metastatic setting for individuals with HER2-positive breast cancer, and then in the early stage setting, I think oncologists became more acutely aware of the impact of this drug on cardiovascular health, particularly if given either concurrently with anthracyclines or following shortly thereafter anthracyclines. And what we were seeing, particularly in women with early stage breast cancer, is that we were seeing drops in the left ventricular ejection fraction while they were on therapy. Oncologists really then at that point became a little bit intimidated by what that meant. If we followed the guidelines at that time for, in that case, women were stopping or that we were holding their trastuzumab therapy. And the issue I had with that is now we were holding a potentially curative therapy for women with early stage breast cancer. That's when I really sat back and thought, what can we do to try and ensure that women with HER2-positive early stage breast cancer are receiving the best possible therapy without compromising their cardiovascular health? So I literally reached out to some of my cardiology colleagues, and we sat down and had a coffee one day when I was working in Ottawa, Canada, and said, we need to work together. We need to work together so that I can continue to deliver this life-saving therapy to these individuals while we're not compromising their cardiovascular health. And I think not only, I was not obviously the only person globally that recognized that, but this really led, I think, initially to the growing movement of cardio-oncology, whereby we recognized, yes, there are consequences of this therapy, but what can we do to try and prevent those? And if they happen, what can we do to improve cardiovascular health so we can continue cancer therapy?
As someone who helped shape the field, what were those early days of cardio-oncology like? Was it hard to convince people it mattered?
They were tough. The early days were very tough, and I'll tell you why, is because I think in medicine, we have traditionally worked in silos. So as an oncologist, I was responsible for treating an individual's cancer. A cardiologist is responsible for treating cardiovascular disease. We're talking about risk factors, but has not traditionally been a lot of communication between these subspecialties. And so when I was having an issue with, in early days with individuals who had compromise of their heart function, and I would send them to the cardiologist, they would say, that's simply stop the cancer drug. That's what's causing the problem. But I didn't want to stop the cancer drug because that was a life, sustaining or life improving therapy. So it really was breaking down those barriers and those walls to improve the communication really between oncologists and cardiologists. Of course, now we have nurses and physiotherapists involved too. But that took a lot of convincing. And while that may seem obvious that we just need to communicate with each other, it wasn't really that easy to do. And I think it has taken years. It took years initially to try and convince our colleagues that we need to sit together in a room and we need to actually talk about these patients and treat them not as a disease, but we need to treat these individuals as a person, a whole person. So what impact does my cancer therapy have on them, and what impact does their cardiovascular health have on the therapy I can give them? And how can we manage all this together as a team, working together? And I have to say, I'm very pleased over the last, 15 years. It's become much easier. Those walls are coming down. We're speaking with each other and we're communicating. And I think that is a key, because patient care is complicated. It can be. As newer drugs come out onto the market and into our clinic, things are getting more complex. And the more complex they get, the more important it is to communicate with each other.
How would you describe your leadership style in a few words, and how has it evolved over time?
I would say that my leadership style is, in one word, is collaboration. I don't feel personally that I need to sort of be the one always at the top or on the podium or the one that's, pushing things forward. But what I try to do in my leadership style is bring people together so that they can work together, collaborate, and communicate. And I think that is key, because this is not something that can be accomplished either one person or one discipline. It's really sitting down together, working together, collaborating. And that's really what I have tried to do. Initially when I was in Canada, I established the Canadian Cardio-Oncology Network, which was one of the first sort of networks globally. And that's exactly what we tried to do. We wanted to collaborate with our colleagues across the country. We wanted to learn from each other and share that knowledge. And then we wanted to try and really have that lead to improved patient care. That was the ultimate goal. So collaboration, communication, I would say, would be my leadership styles.
So let's move on to the upcoming event, the Global Cardio-Oncology Summit in Cape Town, which we know brings together experts from across disciplines. From your perspective, what is the core mission of this year's summit, and what impact do you hope it will have on how cardio-oncology is being delivered worldwide?
Thank you for asking that question. This year, you're right, we are so happy to be in Cape Town, South Africa. This, by the way, is our 10th Global Cardio-Oncology Summit. So we are celebrating now 10 years of this annual meeting, which is really exciting. This year is our first year that we've been in this part of the world. And as a global organization, we felt it was important to bring our message to different parts of the world. My hope and our goals of this year's summit is to not only bring together experts from around the world to look at how we can enhance cardiovascular care in patients with cancer, but how we can deliver care in low and middle income countries. We recognize that the resources that we have here in North America are not the same as they are in other parts of the world. And yet those individuals that live in these countries also deserve to have good access to care, but they may not have the same resources. So we specifically are going to be focusing on that at this meeting, trying to come up with ways we can deliver care. And, we, again, as healthcare providers, have been used to people coming to us for their care, us meaning in a hospital or clinical care setting. But one thing that COVID really taught us is that maybe we need to be looking more at how we can bring care to individuals. So if they can't come to see us in a clinic, if they can't come to the hospital, using the modern technology that we have, how can we bring care closer to them? And the other thing I think we're going to be really focusing on is working with our allied healthcare providers. So whether that be nursing, pharmacy, nurse practitioners, that there is a limit on physician resources in many low and middle income countries. And one way what we can think about is how can we use their existing resources, whether that be nursing or other healthcare providers, to try and improve the cardiovascular care of individuals with cancer. So we really need to sort of open our minds a little bit and think outside the box about providing care in different ways to different people, depending on the country and depending on the resources available to that country.
What key lesson or best practice do you hope participants will bring back from the summit and implement in their day-to-day care?
I think that sometimes at these summits, we tend to focus on imaging, cardiovascular imaging, and what is the latest and the greatest, or the newer drugs and how they can impact cardiovascular health. But I think at some times we need to go back to the very basics. So what I hope is that people go back to their institutions and think about what are some of the things I can do to improve cardiovascular health of patients in my institution with cancer, which may be as simple as looking at cardiovascular risk factors. And by that, I mean smoking, lifestyle factors, smoking cessation, weight, obesity, exercise, control of hypertension, control of diabetes. These are some very simple things that we can start with to try and improve the cardiovascular health of individuals while they're either starting or going through their cancer therapy. And yes, there are other medications that we can add in if needed, but I think we need to always think about the basics and things that we can do that don't cost a lot of money and yet can really lead to improvement in cardiovascular care. So you have to start somewhere. And where I would say we need to start is looking at the very basic factors that impact cardiovascular health.
Well, I think everyone in the field is waiting for the summit, and I'm pretty sure it will be a great success. Like the previous years, this year will be success as well. So let's move on and a little bit talk about how do you balance collaboration with industry and digital tools while safeguarding scientific independence and patient trust?
It's a very good question. I mean, obviously, we do work with our industrial partners, and we are very grateful that they have provided support for this meeting. Without that support, it would be very difficult to host this meeting, particularly in South Africa, because it is very far for many individuals to travel, particularly those coming from North America. I think one thing that we have always been very clear on is that industry support supports us to provide educational events, but that we are the ones that develop the agenda, and it's that the industry support does not guide us in terms of what we say or how we deliver that message. We certainly want this to be very evidence-based, all the information that we provide. And importantly, where we don't know the answers, we will certainly inform individuals of where the gaps are, the knowledge gaps. So our industry sponsors are aware of that, and they do understand that everything that we discuss is based on evidence, that we are not there to support a given drug, but we're there to support our patients in general and give a very unbiased viewpoint of where the field stands right now in terms of cardiovascular care. So we deal with this in medicine all the time, and this is no different. We'll be dealing, we have established these rules for our upcoming summit. And for the most part, I think everyone works very well together. We just want to make sure that we are providing the best information for our patients and our healthcare providers so that we can move forward and we can continue to improve the cardiovascular health of individuals with cancer.
Can you share one patient story that changed how you design your program or protocols?
I actually have many patient stories. I've been very privileged to take care of many individuals over the years with cardiovascular issues, but perhaps I can share one story of an individual that I treated, actually a male with breast cancer, which does not happen very often. So male breast cancer represents about 1% of all breast cancers. But unfortunately, this individual also had a heart transplant and had been treated in an outside center and ran into issues in terms of the delivery of the therapy that he needed, and really came to see me at our center because other people did not feel comfortable treating him with the cancer therapy he needed. And here sort of was the issue with comfort level, but recognizing that if he did not have this treatment, that he would not survive his cancer diagnosis, but dealing with the fact that, yes, there were cardiovascular complications related or risks related to his treatment. So this is where, again, you really need to sit down and bring all the team together and say, given the circumstances, how can we safely treat this person, or at least as safely as possible? How can we treat this person? Because to me, saying you can't treat someone just wasn't acceptable, because I knew that if I didn't treat this individual, his disease would progress and he would die from his cancer. And so that really has made me to be more proactive in this whole field about what we're thinking. And in fact, there's this new entity now called permissive cardiotoxicity, which is still a relatively new term. But permissive cardiotoxicity really speaks to the fact that can we permit a little bit of toxicity if we are able to provide a treatment that is life-saving or life-sustaining? And there have been a few small retrospective studies saying this is safe to do, and there's an ongoing prospective study being conducted. So we're still learning, but on an individual case-by-case basis, I think this is where we need to sit down as a group and say, what can we do for this individual? And recognizing that these answers are not in a textbook or in an article. These are things, real life situations that we deal with on a daily basis with our patients. Our patients, their circumstances aren't always, something that we can find in a textbook or a paper, but it's something that we have to, using our knowledge and our experience and that of others, how can we move forward? And by the way, the International Cardio-Oncology Society, and of course, GCOS is our annual meeting. The one thing that has been really great about the society is the ability to reach out to our partners. Not only can we work with our partners and our colleagues locally, but I often will send out, emails to my global colleagues and get a global opinion. So recognizing when you're facing very challenging situations, fortunately, with modern technology, we can reach out to our colleagues globally. And so it's been so fantastic to have that network available so that I can reach out and find and discuss, things with my colleagues to come up with what we think is a reasonable answer. So that I really, really value.
If a smaller or resource limited hospital asked you to start a cardio-oncology service tomorrow, what would your day one starter playbook look like? Like people, pathway, one metric?
For those in centers or individuals who want to start a cardio-oncology clinic, first of all, you do need a champion in your center. You do clearly need someone who's going to put in the work to do that and to bring together the people that you need. And then you need to develop a pathway so that oncologists understand who they should be referring to your clinic, recognizing that not every individual with cancer needs to be referred. So there are risk stratification tools, one that was produced and is cited in the ESC Cardio-Oncology Guidelines published in 2022. So risk stratification of patients, hopefully the oncologists encouraging them to do this to determine who who should be referred to your clinic. And then within a clinic, I mean, I think one of the early metrics I think that's so important, that's easy to measure is, can that individual who's been referred complete their prescribed cancer therapy? In other words, assuming that it's being held or you're questioning whether you can continue that, this is a metric that's easy to measure. So you want to say, if the oncologist wants to give them 6 cycles of treatment, can they complete that treatment? And I think that is an easy metric to measure and valuable. So setting up a clinic, and we could talk for a while about that, but ensure you have the good team, ensure you have a champion, speak with your oncologist to try and encourage them to use the risk stratification tools to determine who's at highest risk and who should be referred to a cardio-oncologist. And then within your clinic or your program, collect the data, but also one metric is to look at who is able to complete their prescribed cancer therapy.
What do you see as the biggest blind spot in cardio-oncology today?
I think that, there is still oncologists still to some degree have not recognized the impact of cancer therapies on cardiovascular health. And certainly oncologists are aware of anthracyclines, they're aware of HER2 targeted agents such as trastuzumab, but we know that cardiovascular health is not just heart failure. So this is how cardio-oncology started, focusing on those 2 classes of drugs and their impact on heart failure. But we now know there are many cancer drugs out there that can cause arrhythmias, for instance, atrial fibrillation. Some of our drugs can cause hypertension, such as tyrosine kinase inhibitors, the immune checkpoint inhibitors, which are used just about in every type of cancer now, that can lead to, in rare cases, myocarditis. So it's recognizing it's not just heart failure, that the impact of cancer therapies can lead to many cardiovascular consequences. And that's number 1. Number 2 is recognizing the importance of managing cardiovascular risk factors. So if an individual with cancer comes to you and they have poorly controlled diabetes or poorly controlled hypertension, they're overweight, they don't exercise, these factors are going to have an impact on the ability of that individual to tolerate their cancer therapy and potentially long-term consequences down the road in terms of their overall health and cardiovascular health. So those 2 things. And as oncologists, we're very busy. We're focused on the cancer. We're focused on the trying to deliver cancer therapy and some of the other known side effects from treatment. But we really need to pay more attention to these factors. And the other thing I would mention is that don't be afraid to reach out to your colleagues for help in management of these things. So if you don't feel comfortable in managing hypertension, or you don't feel comfortable in managing their uncontrolled diabetes, which I wouldn't expect everyone to, make sure you just refer them to someone who can help you with that. And that's why it requires a multidisciplinary team to do that. So it's not just about treating the cancer. As I've said throughout this interview, it's about treating the whole person.
Where do you see and where do you expect the field to be in 5 to 10 years? And what are you most excited about?
I think where we are going, which is, in my mind, the correct direction, is looking at prevention. So when cardio-oncology first became a subspecialty, we were very focused on the management of cardiovascular toxicity for patients who were on cancer therapy. So people who had heart failure or arrhythmias, or they develop myocarditis, and how do we manage that? How do we treat that? The field is now moving more towards prevention. So how do we recognize those patients at high risk? And if they are at high risk, what can we do to try and prevent them from developing cardiovascular toxicity? And really, isn't that the key? Because why wait until there's heart damage and then treat it? Things that are helping us along the way is we've developed practical tools that are available, but also there are improvements in cardiovascular imaging that are able to detect cardiovascular issues earlier. And let's not forget about artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is really permeated throughout medicine. including cardio-oncology. And now they're developing or have developed, there are now at least 2 ECGs, AI ECGs that can be used to try and predict who will develop heart failure or who will develop an arrhythmia such as atrial fibrillation. So these technologies are improving, and now we need to understand how to use them proactively upfront to ensure that we have a good idea of who's at risk and then how we can prevent that risk. And secondly, I think what we are now doing is we're being much more proactive about trying to understand the mechanisms of cardiovascular toxicity for those novel drugs that are coming into the clinic. So in the last few years, a number of pharmaceutical companies have reached out to me and my colleagues as they are developing novel drugs that may have a signal around cardiovascular toxicity to see what they can do proactively to try and deal with that. And understanding, of course, the mechanisms so that we can deal with that. So traditionally, drugs are approved and we've after they've been in the clinic, when we recognize there's a cardiovascular issue, then we try and deal with it. So we want to understand the mechanisms up front. So that's really the basic translational research piece there. So that part we need to do a better job at, and we need to be more proactive on terms of prevention and using modern technology, modern imaging tools to try and determine who's at risk.
And my last question, what advice would you give your younger self at the start of this journey?
That is a very good question. If I were to advise my younger self, I would always say that if you are very passionate about something and you feel very strongly about something in terms that may lead to improvement in patient care, that you have to be persistent in trying to achieve that change. It's never easy when you're trying to change something that has been previously established. So when I started out in cardio-oncology, it was a pretty lonely field, and there was only a few of us worldwide who were very passionate about this. And it's hard. It's very hard. But if you truly deep down believe in it, and if you're passionate about it, you keep moving forward. In fact, I will tell you a little story just to end this interview. I think is important because when I first started the cardio-oncology clinic in Ottawa, Canada, I met with my cardiology colleagues, and we said, just let's do it. We didn't really ask for permission, by the way. Not that I would say that maybe this will work everywhere, but we just started the first clinic. And then about a year later, one of my colleagues said, I didn't know we had a cardio-oncology clinic. I said, yeah, it's been running for a year. Oh, that's great. So just speaks to the fact that don't give up. Reach out to your colleagues who have the same passion. They can support you, support each other, and continue to move it forward because, if we had given up, if we hadn't done this, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that's so important. And it really is about being a pioneer, isn't it? It's about being a pioneer in a field that didn't exist before. And there have been other instances and examples of it. It's not just cardio-oncology, but I just think that's a good example of something that has been created because there was a clinical need, and which is good, but not easy. So that would be my advice. Passionate, work hard, find people that have the same mission and vision, the same ideas, work together collectively so that you can try and bring your passion and the whole field that you're interested forward. And I certainly did try to do that both in Canada and then here in the US and then globally. And I think for the most part, it's been working and it has grown. And I think the other thing that you have to recognize is it takes time. That change does not happen overnight. And so be patient, be persistent, but be patient. And hopefully by doing that and working with, like-minded people and passionate people, you will be successful. And I think, in cardio-oncology, we still have a long ways to go, but certainly it's better that we were in a better spot now than we were 15 years ago.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dent, for a very interesting conversation. And we're all waiting for photos from Cape Town. And also, obviously, we're waiting for insights from the Cardio-Oncology Summit. So thank you very much.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to OncoDaily on YouTube. Hit the bell icon to stay updated.